An in-depth look at the integral role that women have played in country music is showcased in a special exhibit now on display at Bristol's Birthplace of Country Music Museum. It is the first locally curated exhibit that will travel to other institutions when it closes here at year's end.
So this is I've Endured, Women in Old Time Music, and it's an in-house exhibit, so that means that we created it in-house. Almost everything was done by our staff. It's sort of a labor of love, a passion project for us because it has been sort of on our minds for several years. A former colleague of mine was like one day just said, hey, I think the story of women in old time music could be a really great exhibit one day. And we're like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then towards the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, we really started to think more deeply about it. And so it's been about a 2.5-year project for us. And what's really special about it from our standpoint is that like I said, the curatorial team was taking the lead on it internally, and then we worked with 2 external guest curators, Kathy Fink and Kalia Yeagle, both of whom are musicians and educators and are both featured in the exhibit. And we also got to work with one of our friends at the East Tennessee Historical Society who has traveled exhibits before, so he gave us a lot of logistical advice because this is going to be our very first traveling exhibit. So it'll go to other venues after it finishes here at the museum on December 31st. So we're really excited about that. We sort of met together for about 6 months and didn't really write that much that first 6 months. We just met and talked and brainstormed and talked about sort of the thematic thing or the sort of topics that we wanted to cover, the women who might fit into some of those topics and themes, some of the women that had particular significance, some of the women that we thought had been either forgotten or weren't known about the way they should be. And in the end, what we did is the exhibit has about 6 different sort of thematic sections to sort of lead you through the story that we're trying to tell. And the story that we're trying to tell is basically that women have always been part of this music and always been a significant part of this music, but that they haven't always been recognized or celebrated to the same degree that men have.
Featured in the exhibit are those who gained commercial success, lesser-known musicians who have left their mark on the genre, and several contemporary artists who were influenced by the early pioneers of old-time music.
So I don't know if you can see that, but each of the different sections have different colorways and then also different patterns on the border. All of those are based on old quilt patterns, and that was sort of going back to the idea of women's work and women being in the home and maybe not having the same opportunities in those early days. But it also meant that we could think about ways that when it does travel, we could encourage those venues to bring their own community stories into the exhibit. So we wanted to be sure that we were talking about the people who were iconic and also the people who were just working musicians who they're also working a job as a librarian or they're also working a job as a teacher, but that music is still a huge part of their lives and they're really influential on other musicians and like being really inspirational to other women in particular. And so that's a story that's not just specific to the birthplace of country music, that's a story that can travel anywhere and be true. And so that was sort of the idea behind it, is that this is a story that people can make their own also. I have probably 2 favorite women, but one of them is one I didn't know anything about until we started this. One of them I knew about, so I loved her story already, and she's one of our iconic women, and that's Elizabeth Cotten, who was an African-American banjo and guitar player who wrote the song she's most famous for when she was 12 years old. It's called Freight Train, and I love her story. But the other woman is Jenny Lou Carson, and she's someone I didn't know anything about till we started doing this research. So that's, for me, it was like my hidden heroine, if you know what I mean. And she was in the 1930s, she was on the WLS barn dance with her sisters. They were the 3 little maids. They were like just in their late teens, early 20s at that time. And they were on the WLS barn dance. And then Jenny Lou, she was known, her full name, I believe, is Virginia Lucille Overstake. But she then sort of went solo and started playing with the Sweet Violet Boys for a while. And she actually sang several quite risque songs, which is really unusual for a woman in hillbilly music in the first place. So I love that part of it, that she's sort of stepping outside the boundaries of what was considered appropriate. She then sort of went off and created another persona that was very much like an Annie Oakley type musician persona, where she like had rope tricks and gun tricks and lots of sort of trick sort of yodeling and that kind of stuff. But then she started writing music, and she is one of the most prolific country music songwriters of the 1940s and 50s, has written some really famous songs, one of which is You Two Timed Me One Time Too Often, which has been covered by like over 100 country music stars probably. It's a really famous song. And she wrote a song called Let Me Go Devil, which was about alcohol abuse and alcoholism and was sort of inspired by Hank Williams. But her record producer didn't feel like that was necessarily an appropriate or a very happy song, so they changed it to Let Me Go Lover, and it became like a heartbreak song instead, which was more appropriate.
The Birthplace of Country Music Museum is open each day except Monday, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Sundays. I've Endured, Women in Old-Time Country Music will remain open through December 31st.
The thing that's great about this exhibit is, there's a lot of information in here, so I would definitely give yourself some time if you're coming to visit it. But it's also got some really great stories, and we want to hear your stories, so we give people at the front of the exhibit, but sort of we hope they'll see it as they're leaving, an opportunity to write down other women in old-time country bluegrass music that they think have had significant careers or something that they've had some wonderful contributions, because even though they might not be in the exhibit, we do have a really robust website that we are putting every week. We're putting new bios on of women that are both in the exhibit and women that have been suggested to us.